And then we will prepare your presentation. Good morning to you all. Thank you very much for your patience. I know that you will want to kill me because you have to wait for half an hour to have your coffee.
So it's quite easier for me to. I miss many words in Spanish when we talk about these topics. My perspective is quite different from those, but in a way quite coherent as well and consistent with those that we listened to this morning. Because my perspective is mainly the perspective of someone being an art historian as a background, an educational background. Then I had studied sociology, management, and all that kind of stuff, anthropology, whatever I met across my life that could help me understanding that complexity that no discipline by itself is really able to tackle in a way. So this is more or less my perspective and where I do come from. I was also a kind of an activist at the time, so I cannot easily understand those different words. What I would like to talk to you about in this, I will try to make it really short because I would really like to have the room we didn't have to have an exchange with you with that and leave you with some questions. Of course, we have been talking a lot about audience development because audience development is a keyword, is a buzzword. We all know, we all hate that. But actually, many of us hate the same audience word and development word. But there was worse. There was building once again. So, and there are many words, many ways we can say that concept. But the point is that we are talking about people and why we are talking about people and why audience development is such a fashionable idea. In a way, it's quite interesting for us as well, because I think the point is also within this huge cultural process we are in the middle of, the point is to really never stop asking ourselves why and how and for whom. And so question a little bit the thing can be, first of all, asking ourselves why audience development matters, why everybody seems to like and hate this thing at the same time. And this is relevant because the different perspectives on audience development are also the different perspectives of the different people working within the ecosystem. So within our cultural organizations, so the marketing people, curators, artists, audiences, politicians, policymakers, activists, everybody has his idea. And those ideas come from somewhere. And this is quite relevant because when we talk about something, and when we say we want to have more audiences, we want to be really open to people, we want to open up that conversation, we should know that we will probably are talking about different things with the different people we are relating with. So those multiple perspectives are basically that, of course, digital made something happen. So the first thing is that, of course, at a certain point, that idea that people could say something, and actually they wanted to say something, and they actually had the means to say something, became suddenly true in our museums, in our institutions, and so on. So also in those cultural organizations which are institutions, people suddenly appeared in a way. Up to then, it was just about activists of the 70s and performing arts. And in some so by that time, people was not part of the cultural discourse in cultural organizations. So when it happened both with impacts on the in terms of communication. What you see on the left is a picture that a friend of mine took in front of a museum in 2012, where they just were writing out, sorry, we are not going to have the exhibition today, we are closed, and that's all. And this is how people reacted. White, middle-aged, educated people wrote things that I would really not dare to repeat now in public, writing them, treating them like a Facebook page because they knew they wanted to say something and they felt able to do that. They were enabled to do that and they did it. And this comes from digital. But the same happened with collection. This was a communication campaign of the Metropolitan Museum that dates back 10 years ago. So we are talking about geological eras in terms of technology and social development. And this was the first time that people, well, in a way was asked to interact with objects. So with the same idea of what is culture, how can I interact with it? Am I allowed to? So these questions. So this is why this happened on one hand. So something very new and quite recent. Then there are also artistic reasons. This is an artwork of a relational artist called Laura Morelli. She has been working a lot with very different communities, and she has been working a lot for this exhibition, especially with families, with children with mental disabilities. And she spent months together with them, and she did an amazing, super powerful work in terms of representing artistically, in a very high quality level, what those families felt and the complexity of the thing, really making those topics accessible to other people who didn't have that issue. So they didn't know how it felt. And this is what is happening for relational artists. So we have a lot of artists working on that, especially in the performing arts. We think about all the co-creation, all the co things that we are talking about a lot in this last year, especially. So there are also artistic reasons. Then there are, of course, economical reasons. So cultural policies at a certain point decided that this was the point. This was about money. So, and this is also our fault, because we are the cultural sector, so meaning the 0%, or when we are lucky, the 1.something% of the overall budget, okay, in public administrations or in any public policies. So we were so little, we were so weak that we needed to say, no, we are strong, we are worth. It's because we make things happen. It's because we make people richer. It's because we to stimulate creative industries. It's because we do business. It's about money. We are big. And this was just our strategy as cultural sector, to just stepping out from that blind spot where we were in the corner, just to say that we can sit at the same table with the other policies, the capital P policies, economic ones. We are relevant. This also is a double-sided issue, but most of our policies, cultural policies around the world now are talking about culture first as a resource, then as, in a way, we are in the same pot with cultural and creative industries because of that. Then there are other reasons that are less recent, because they have always been there. When we talk about democracy, and we talk on one hand about the kind of experience that we have learned so far, from an institutional point of view when it was about Van Abbe, but also from an activist point of view. And this is about the relevance and the accountability, and about the fact that we are actually public funded, most of us. So we are using public money, taxes of everybody, but we are just for few, and those few who, of course, could easily pay by themselves for what we do. So a kind of responsibility. Of course, this is a long discourse. This is not new, but it revamped in a way, because we probably had to get out from that idea. And so in terms of cultural policies, the discourse now is much more shifting from democratization of culture, that top-down approach that we were hearing here, they didn't like that much, to go much towards a cultural democracy, so enabling cultural and creative behaviors for people. And then the last one, no money, not anymore. So suddenly, even the last ones, those who really didn't care at all about people in their museums, in their concert halls and whatever, even those had to realize that when their funding were cut, they had to matter for someone. They had to be relevant for someone actually buying their tickets, or someone maybe just defending them when they were facing cuts. And then Europe asked us, of course. We appeared in the European priorities for Creative Europe, and so, of course, audience development. Wow, so we have to do that. Also in academic terms, in the study, in the research field, you can see everything it's like converging on that idea. So that's why everybody likes it. But that's why most of people think about audience development as different things when we talk about it. So you're probably financial manager will think about more sustainable institution or organization, and the director will think about more prestigious one, and the curator will be a more appreciated one, and the educator will be about a more democratic one, or whatever. So, from the organization's perspective, because this is, now we come to us, as Adeste Plus, we have and adopt, let's say, the organizational perspective, although, of course, policy on one hand, so the big picture on the one hand, and organizations are different point of view, of course. we are tackling the issue from the organizational point of view. And here is when it comes to the second point of perspective, which is celebrating storytelling. This is a story that I told in Madrid a couple of years ago, and that, when I ended, raised a lot of debates. So this is a story mainly of John Brown, a rider of trains, who said to reporters that he doesn't like classical music. He said, I have friends who actually like classical music and I think they enjoy, but I don't. The reaction from artists is, well, of course, John Brown has a problem because he can't understand arts. And it's because he's not educated. Maybe it's not totally his fault, but it's because the government doesn't put enough money into education, to the arts, so that he's not able to understand them. So it's not that he doesn't like, it's just that he doesn't understand them. The reaction of the rider of train, of course, is, oh my God, sorry, I don't like to feel the ignorant one, you know? I don't like you to tell me that. It's not because I'm ignorant. It's just because I don't like it. Please believe me. The third perspective of the marketing perspective. And he says, of course, it's not fault of John Brown. It's not his fault. It's up to us, because we didn't reach him. We just have to reach him out, to bring him in, so we have to send him a very well-segmented newsletter, finding the right place, the right time, and the right format, and he will for sure enjoy it. And once we bring in him, then it will be about relational markets, so keeping him in the loop. And that's enough. And again, John Brown says, no, please, really, it's not about that crap. I really don't care about that. It's just that I don't like that. And I can really easily spend a lot of money drinking beers in pubs with friends, but I don't want to spend them for concerts. It's not about the price. It's not. I perfectly know where the concert hall is placed. It's just that I don't care. We could add the educator perspective on the other hand, okay? So we could have all the perspectives that you can imagine within your museum or your institution. The last one is the journalist perspective. So a journalist finally said, okay, of course, it's not its fault of all of you. It's just because this is so elitistic. And of course, the point is that it's so posh that people go in there. If he was able to get there, to dress how he likes, to take pictures during the concert, to clap whenever he wants, and possibly having, I don't know, maybe musicians dressed in more casual ways, this could help. And of course, and again, he says, no, I don't like spinach, okay? But no one blames me for that. Why should I like concerts? So the point is that, of course, who's right here and who's wrong? In a way, all of them are right. An activist should say, add another perspective and saying, of course, this is what you call culture. It's not his culture. So we can add all the perspective that you want on that. Of course, from an organizational perspective, the usual middle-sized organization, let's say a museum or whatever, the point is that all of them are right. None of them has the means to do that alone. And the point is that matching together all these perspectives is the very difficult thing. So the point is that unless the educator, the marketer, the communicator, the curator, and all of them, let's stick together with possibly John Brown, there's no chance that they can reach out for him and those like him. Okay? But the point is that they have to do this together, bringing into the discourse all their perspectives and their vocabularies, which are completely different, because if you put educators and marketers in the same place, they will end up very bad usually, because most of the time they don't understand each other. So that's the point. And the point is also that unless you push together in the same direction at the same time, you probably will not succeed in that. But this again is kind of the point is, of course, we are not developing audiences. We are developing cultural organizations. And of course, this is the point. Okay? So this is, well, let's say, our perspective, the perspective we adopted. And we tried to put that into Adeste. So Adeste Plus is a European funded project. We have been funded this year in 2018, so we are our kickoff in December, so we are at the very beginning. What I can tell you about Adeste Plus is what we'll be doing, what we have learned so far from the other projects we come from. Because in a way we are coming from a road, so it's not new for us. We have been working together with different partners in this project at the European level since 2012. In 2013, we started our first program. We never cooperated together before, but it was a kind of a magic because we really met others coming from different countries and different perspectives, also with different, so we had more intercultural perspective, more accessibility perspective, more marketing perspective, depending on the countries. And it was super interesting, and especially we were all very concerned with the fact that we couldn't help cultural organizations because we were seeing and we had experienced and often evaluated or supported the design of incredibly effective, awesome projects about audience engagement, okay? So about bringing people into the discourse because the practices raised from the ground. So you as cultural operators have done an amazing job for many years, especially educators, but not just them. Educators, facilitators, architects, designers, everybody has done plenty of amazing things. The point is that those things were just an add-on, okay? They were just added to the institution. They were never able to change the institution. They had their budget, their timing, so few resources. So I'm doing the serious job, and you, usually the educator, you can play in the backyard, okay? So have your play, have your game. When you finish, please come back and finish your job here because we are doing the serious stuff while you play with your 2 migrants and 3 people with disabilities. This was more or less where the things ended up. So Adeste was trying to say, okay, mainly it's because there is a lack of competences. So we were working on competences of cultural institutions, but we were working on individuals, on single change makers. As Sonia seen yesterday, she was part of those. We trained like 65 across Europe in very different kind of cultural organizations. Some of them succeeded and did amazing things, some of them less, because all of them faced a huge resistance when they came back to their organization, of course, because they were alone, championing, in a way, the idea of bringing a kind of audience thinking into their discourse and their practices, but they were alone. So we learned that unless we tackled the whole organization, it was very difficult for individuals to bring that change. So inoculating a kind of a virus, but without the right conditions in the surrounding to let it grow into our body. Then with Perspective as well, we have learned so much. You will be listening afterwards to Giada that will tell you a lot about it, but we had plenty of learnings about co-creation and participatory processes in general. That gave us a lot of insights more. Then we won the tender for realizing the study Engage Audiences. At that time, also thanks to the result of Adeste, the European Commission had acknowledged that unless you bring an audience thinking into the heart of a cultural organization, whatever it is, from NGOs to big institutions, you won't have probably any possibility to make a lasting change of any kind. So they were asking us, okay, we put it as a priority, everybody's ticking the box, audience development, when they apply for Creative Europe, but we have a problem because actually we are not sure about what it is. Okay? And most of our cultural organizations applying for funds are not sure about what it is. So in general, as policymakers, they had these concerns. So we studied them, we looked for cultural organizations, we came up with 30 case studies, we tried to systematize a little bit the language, vocabulary, the literature, the approaches, because there was a big mess there. And we ended up with few case studies that really can tell a story, and most of them are story of change. So, because it's kind of easy if you're born a radical, but if you're born like a very institutional, with a very institutional approach, with a very 20th century approach, how to change. And this was the point. So trying to understand where change happens, when it happens, how can we support that change throughout the sector. Then we did Connect, which is now running, and it's always about training. And we tried there to introduce a kind of action research, making people work together, matching students and professionals in single action research projects, and we started introducing design thinking approach, like prototyping and testing, just to help those changes by little steps. Then we come to Adeste Plus. Finally, Adeste Plus tried to tackle the issue from a very ambitious perspective. So what we want to do is to develop a methodology for organizational change, a blueprint for organizational change for the audience-focused organizations. So this is the ambition, is quite high, as you can imagine. But so what we concretely are going to do, we are prototyping a methodology, owing a lot to design thinking, but not that much. So we love to hack methodologies, and it will be quite funny. I think we are in the middle of that. We will testing this with our artistic partners who are taking their risks. We have 6 artistic partners, huge institutions, most of them, but also kind of weird organizations like Arinera. One museum, which is a huge museum, in Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon, 4 theaters, 2 of those really huge theaters, national theaters, in both cases in Croatia and Italy and so on. So 200 people living, working there, so difficult to make a change. But we like challenges, so we will try. They will test this. We will create cross-departmental metrics group works, and they will be in charge of working. We will help them working in a different way, using a lot of design thinking, and designing together, trying to designing also the mechanism to involve the whole organization to bring that change into the organization. And through this process, they will develop programs for audiences. We don't know whom, because they will decide, because this depends on who they are. Some of them will hate the word audiences, and they will not use that. They will say communities. Some others will have other discourses. Some would like to work with young people or whoever. So this is what we are going to do. They are going to experiment, then we will refine the model and try to understand what was good, what was not less good, what was completely wrong. And we will test this on other organizations. So our artistic partners will become the champions, and together with us, they will deliver the same kind of workshops to other cultural organizations in the same 6 countries. And then we will refine it again, and we will try to adapt it, not just to different size and type of organization, but also to different cultural contexts. Because if it has to be a blueprint, it has to be adaptable to any context. So every cultural context should be able to put into the process their own perspective. And then we will have 3 huge summer schools, which are meant to be really the momentum for everything. So I really invite you to follow us in this, because they will be open, of course. It will be 5 full days of fully intensive change making. And it will be our safe space for really risking all what we can risk and learn as much as possible, because as you know well, you never lose, no? So or you win or you learn. So this is the approach that we are trying to keep. The first one will be next September in Lisbon, so you are warmly invited to be there. The funny thing is that we have this kind of partner composition, because what we want to have is a kind of systemic change. And what we understood in making change in the cultural sector is that unless you don't look to the whole picture, you don't involve all the players of the ecosystem. And the players of the ecosystem are both knowledge partners that are quite knowledgeable in terms of audience development or design thinking or whatever, so techniques and research. Artistic partners, because the challenge must be their challenge, not us just. Otherwise, you open a call for a cultural organizations, they will send you one person, the motivated one, and she will keep possibly isolated afterwards. While if it's the whole organization on board, they are on board. They are accountable. They want to change. They signed it. Okay. And then we have policy partners. And this is the most relevant thing, because policy partners are those who will ensure the conditions for a future development of this kind of working. Because if you still put the same KPIs and you still ask for numbers of borrowed books to a library, the point is that the library will never be measured in the right way, because the last thing that they do now is actually giving you books to read, okay? They do a lot of stuff, because the library today is not the library of then. And the same thing, designing programs with the assumption of a democratization of cultural framework is completely different than designing programs for funding the arts in adopting, let's say, the cultural democracy perspective, for which, for example, Arinera is something paid by the city. The municipality pays for that because the city recognizes that this is one of the ways in which culture must be part of life of their citizens. So for us, it's not just about all the challenges that you can imagine, but mainly a truly cultural challenge. And since change requires time and a kind of a systemic approach, of course, we try to embed into the same design of the project this cascade program that goes for refining and widening the impact of what we do, especially ensuring sustainability and reflection also from policymakers, because many policymakers, there are plenty of policymakers, foundations or some, but sometimes they are just funders, not yet policymakers. So they have policies, but they are implicit. And so, in a way, this is what. So the last thing is just the questions I would like to leave you with. Because I think that this is not a given path, okay? We don't know where we are going. We are just taking our risks. And we might come out from this process quite different from what we were when we entered the process. So the point is that the issue between artistic quality and giving power to the people, empowering people to their creative processes, is an issue. And saying that it is not, I think it's the pink elephant in the room. We can say not. We can say it's just a matter of the usual artist worried about that. But it's true, because there are professionals. And if you don't think about that in terms of artistic practice, think about that in terms of heritage. So you have an heritage, you open it up for interpretation, but it's not that you can say whatever you want. Because you can say whatever you want, but still there is some knowledge there that should be respected. Not because it's the way and everybody must know that that knowledge is there, but that knowledge must be acknowledged. And it's also a professional to be a cultural professional. So this is something. The other part is that when we talk about all these kind of projects that are also peaceful and lovely, where everybody's in the same room, all happy, and so we, people with disabilities, migrants and whatever, this is not true. I mean, there are plenty of conflict there. And so in a way, also getting out this, peaceful idea of what because there are also conflicts. There will be. And we should manage them. So we should be ready for conflict. We should also give kind of room for that conflict. Of course, what do we represent through our cultural offer? And this was the Marlene intervention this morning was perfectly on that line. So she concretely said what we are representing, and so how to represent multiple perspectives around what we curated as an heritage, because in a way we are curating, so it's always us and them. It's not pretending that we are them, because it's not. In some cases. In some, yes, can be. But again, conflict, lovely. I love it, but should be said in a way. The other thing is about digital. I recognize, for example, that smARTplaces recognize that digital as a trigger for change. As for us, it was about audience development or capacity building for us as a trigger for change, because we all want that kind of change. But is digital democratic in itself? Isn't it reproducing or even adding an additional layer of discrimination in that, of exclusion in that side? Could be. So not all technology and not all digital is democratic, and also thinking in these terms, it's important to think. The risks of a digital makeup, if we don't really understand the meaning of digital, and we possibly do not, at least not, I do not. I'm possibly too old. I'm not a digital native. All my mental structures were built in a time where actually digital wasn't there. So we even don't know what will be in the future. We can't know. And it's difficult to navigate that insecurity. Of course, how could digital help? For precisely this reason, imagine the future organizations. So the way we organize culture can be completely different. In a way, Vanabe is going towards a kind of idea of a museum of the future. In a way, place for interpretation, but it could be that museums will not exist anymore in 50 years. They have never been, they haven't been there always, since the beginning of the time. Culture has been organized and distributed and produced in many different ways. So it's possible that our institutions will change a lot in shape. And that's fine. How can maybe digital help us imagine new words? And so this is more or less everything I have to say. Just to put some questions, the more relevant thing is that we think that change is absolutely is going to happen. Change is already happening. Navigating that change is quite complex for all of us. But in a way, if we don't take some risks, we will not go anywhere. And maybe being a little bit radical and understanding what all of these projects or what a digital experience can bring as a change into my organization, what all NGOs and different approach and radical approach to cultural activism can bring into my vision. What can actual people bring into my, so how am I transformed by that, and what will I be tomorrow? This is totally, well, unknown, luckily. So we have room for imagination. Okay, thank you.